What's up, crypto junkies? Welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about illusions and delusions and fiat money and the conversation that is around Bitcoin, that there's nothing to back Bitcoin, as if there's something to back US dollar versus just sentiment and the fact that it's been the only thing used. So yes, we're going to dive into that rabbit hole just a little bit. I've got quite a bit that I want to share with you, and so hopefully we can get through this quite quickly. Which on our Twitter at Crypto Junkies, we have 3 videos that are like in 1 minute. So Bitcoin in 1 minute, gold in 1 minute, fiats in 1 minute. I think all 3 of those would be excellent to watch if you haven't already, because the more you know, then you know. There's a debate. I really don't understand why. Somehow, because there's nothing behind Bitcoin, in the same way that there's nothing behind gold, that makes Bitcoin a scam or an illusion or not worth anything. And the assumption there and the presupposition is that by going after Bitcoin and saying that there's nothing backing it, which is what Rubini did recently, and so now this is in the mainstream again. And so let's have this conversation. Look at this article. This article is dated all the way back to December 17th, and this has been talked about since the beginning of Bitcoin, 2009, 2010. These conversations have been going on. So understand something, that there's nothing behind Bitcoin except for the cost to mine it. There's nothing behind gold except for the cost to mine it. There's nothing behind the US dollar. You see how that works? There's nothing behind it. I could make an argument that there's use case for gold, intrinsic value, history, and just consensus, right? And I could make that argument for Bitcoin as well, that there's use case and that there's consensus and that there's something like to this. With the fiat, I'm trying to be fair and unbiased here. Okay, we could just argue that there's consensus because it's been around for so long that everyone's just used to using it. And that's the case because it's been around for 47 years. Gold standard dropped off in 1971. Most fiat currencies have lost over 90% of their value since 1971. Understand that. Let's just do a quick little fun walk down memory lane, okay? Currently, there's 180 fiat currencies recognized by the UN. First fiat was all the way back in 1000 AD, maybe even before then. This was the first recorded one in China. The oldest is the British pound. It's 317 years old. It was defined as 12 ounces of silver, which is worth less than 1/200th or 0.5% of its original value. So the British pound has lost 99.5% of its value. US dollars lost 97% of its purchasing power against gold since 1971. So the whole argument with gold is that it preserves purchasing power. That's really that's where we start with that discussion, right? Is that it preserves purchasing power. The US dollar is not like that at all because there's nothing backing it. It's really just up to the Federal Reserve, which is a separate entity that decides when and how it's going to get printed. And they're always asking for more bailout capabilities. I just saw this recently. I should do another video on that and dig that back up because there's a whole thread I found on that. Here's the top highlighted comment right here. US dollars are not backed by anything other than the faith of the fools who accept it as payment and of other fools who agree in return to accept it as payment from them. Giving back and forth, that's created the value. So it's the illusion in the value that's created the value, which is very different than something that actually has a use case, that actually is usable. Gold is usable on not just jewelry, but space exploration and spacecrafts. It's used in a lot of electronics. Bitcoin is, it's not used in a lot of stuff. Blockchain is, but Bitcoin is not. There's a use case for it as a currency, and it is it's a proof of work currency. Even just that puts it like miles ahead of fiat, and that was the whole point of it. In fact, almost all of our US dollars, about 90%, are purely abstract. They literally do not exist in tangible form. James Surrock, I'm bad with names, guys. Right there, this guy, reported in 2012 that only 10% of the US money supply, about 1 trillion or roughly 10 trillion total, exists in the form of paper, cash, or coins. Most of it is treasury notes and bonds. The number now appears to be about 1.5 trillion out of 13.7 trillion. There is nothing stopping our banking system from creating more dollars whenever the mood strikes. That's true. I'm putting it kind of in a biased way. Of the 13.7 trillion in the M2 money supply, as of October 2017, 13.7 trillion was created after 1959. To put it another way, it's expanded by 50 times. Okay? Scary stuff. So now let's look at the federal debt clock or US debt clock. I've got two sources here, pretty close to the same. That's 21 trillion, okay? And this one is 21.6. So this is 21.597 or 6 on the dot. So they're a little bit different, but pretty close. Public debt to GDP ratio, 70%. External debt to GDP ratio, 96%. And if you notice that in relationship to a lot of other countries that are top countries, they don't look the same. I won't explain these, but these can be telltale signs of how debt lines up to GDP. So it's coincidental, not, that the national debt is so high, and we have a lot of things on the brink of collapse. We have student loan debt on the rise. We have pension plans on the rise. We have another housing crisis on the rise. There is a looming crash coming. It sucks to talk about it because I feel like a lot of people talking about it, myself included, you just kind of sound like that guy, that conspiracy theorist that at the end of the day, even if he's right, like he doesn't want to, he's not talking about this because he wants to be right. I know I don't. I'm talking about it because there's a lot of shit that just people aren't paying attention to, or they're being naive, like, no, put the blinders on, and if I look away, it goes away, and that's just not the case. So you got to make a plan, okay? You got to make a plan for yourself and for your family. Anyways, back into it. By the end of 2019, 25 trillion. Now, here's the interesting thing is, even though the recorded number is 21 trillion, I keep seeing these numbers floating around that it's more like 24 to 25 trillion. So there's this mystery $4 or $5 trillion that's not really on the books. Of the gross amount of debt held by public other is estimated to be 14 trillion. Held by the Federal Reserve System, estimated to be 2 trillion. So most of that debt is held by us, held by the public other. So I'm assuming that's just a classification of like all of it in one. And this breaks it down. Debt levels are on the rise. Here's another way to look at it. And this actually breaks down just the US. I think if you just go back to the root, yeah, here it is right here. So look at all these numbers just going up, up. Average debt per citizen, $65,000. Median income for average person is about $32,000. That does not add up. We are in over our heads. Most people are in over their heads, which this in and of itself, just deduce some numbers from this. Average income, $32,000. Like, Google it. It's like the first result. And average debt, $65,000. So double. How does that work itself out? How does that work itself out? It can't. Okay, it can't. I'm sure you're starting to get the consensus here, if you haven't already watching this channel, is that there's a problem here. But there might be a solution on the rise. And that's where we can once again talk about cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. So could a cryptocurrency essentially replace fiat? The answer is yes. Ripple's chomping at the bit. Stable coins are playing a role, but those I don't know, and I don't think those will be as big of a player as people assume they will be, unless governments start jumping in on stable coins, which is where we need to open up this conversation about China. So China is one of the largest producers of gold. It's one of the largest holders of gold as well. And they are talking about a state-backed cryptocurrency. So it would be backed by the yuan, and the yuan is backed by gold and a load of it, which is very different than the United States, because even if the United States were to jump to a gold-backed reserve program right now, they don't have enough holdings to make that work unless they were to just, go on a rampage of buying it. And so then somebody, the thought becomes, well, okay, wouldn't the US just be using their silly fiat to buy up gold? They can with some of it, but it's a fine balance of how this whole ecosystem works, because China, believe it or not, buys a lot of the treasuries and bonds that the US creates out of the fiat that it prints. Even understanding that is very important. So China's a big player. They could swoop in and create some serious turmoil here if they were to create a state-backed cryptocurrency. So that would be a stable coin, yes. And I'll tell you what, that would be a lot sexier than fiat by itself, wouldn't it? I mean, that'd get a lot of people wanting to do business with that currency because they would feel confident in it. And it's like 1 degree away. It's like a baby step away from what they've already got with fiat. And it would appease, they think, and I'm sure the assumption is that it would appease the kind of the crypto junkies and the crypto heads out there, which it wouldn't, because it has nothing to do with decentralization. So again, the maximalists and diehards are unaffected by that, but a lot of the general public and retail money would be. there's room in this conversation for a stable coin or a backed coin or a pegged coin, which I'm surprised there's not more of these. I really don't understand why there's not. There are some coins coming out now that are backed. There's a couple that are backed by gold. I know of a couple that are coming out that are pegged or anchored to the price of gold, which I like that too, because if we're playing this whole consensus game and all this is just a consensus illusion, then what's the difference? You get a large enough user base, it's all the same. Some interesting things here. Let's now kind of divert into gold a little bit, and that's where I'm going to end this, talking about this new emergence coming out of the United States. Central banks have added a total of 193 tons of gold to their reserves in the first half of 2018, an 8% increase from the last year. But this overall is a huge increase that countries are stockpiling. It's up 500% since 2000. And China is a big player in that. China holds 1,800 tons of gold in reserves. And it's a big producer of gold. They mine a lot of gold. Countries that are playing around with gold-backed fiats and moving back to trying to revalue their devalued currencies is Turkey. And then we've got what's going on with Venezuela with the Bolivar, and moving to the petro crypto, which is oil-backed, petro-backed. They're trying to have a gold play a role in this as well, which I think that whole situation is getting muddy, and I don't have boots on the ground and feet on the ground there to understand the depth of what's really going on. Turkey's probably the best example because they are massively devalued. And right now I just posted this in the community, in the Crypto Junkies community Discord. There are some really interesting opportunities opening up to get residency and buy land in Turkey. So if you are a jet-setting entrepreneur that travels the world or whatever you want to consider yourself, you want sovereignty, you want flags, freedom flags around the world, that is another option that is opening up quickly for you. But let's remember something, is that the US dollar is still the global reserve, okay? It is the global currency that everyone else pegs to and plays off of still. So that is the big player. I heard some chatter about this a couple weeks back about how there were several states in the US that were trying to push for a bill or a congressional action to now reback the dollar to a fixed amount of gold. And so here's that actual bill. That is a House bill that's trying to get some traction, trying to get some movement. I have not read through this. I will link this and everything else underneath this video like usual. Yeah, you can check this out for yourself. But the interesting thing is that this is even a conversation, proves that there are at the state level people paying attention to this that are trying to push this through. I mean, just glancing through this, it's filled with quite a bit of data here just in the opening section, in the findings. What would that mean? Okay, if we refix to the weight of gold, which I don't think they would. I think they've printed more money than they've actually told us, more fiat, and I think that some of that's hidden. That's my own little kind of working theory. I think it would be incredibly tough to now fix to the weight of gold, and then how would they up their reserves, because the US is one of the lower holders next to China and Russia for gold reserves, and even Turkey's upping their gold reserves at a much quicker rate than the US is. So I think that's very, very interesting. Gold is up a little bit. It's, and Bank of America actually recently stated that they think it's going to go up to $1,300 again, but at least we're like back out of the red zone, which is like the break even for what it costs to mine gold and filter it and turn it into something. We're back above those numbers, so that's good to hear. But this conversation, you see, it's so much more complex. Like, this is literally just the surface, because we haven't even really talked about all the different like sub financial instruments that are in the US dollar monetary, in our current monetary system, which is run by the US dollar. We haven't even started talking about that. Things from inflation to rehypothecation. We haven't talked about those pieces and how cryptocurrency can fix or change or alter those things. Even a gold-backed fiat, removes a lot of what we're dealing with. So it's a very complex conversation. I don't think it's hard. I just think it takes a lot of reading, and then you got to sit with it for a while and then understand it, because I don't consider myself like that smart in this area. And so some of this is painful to read, I got to admit. But I'm getting through it just fine, and I'm understanding like what this actually means. And overall, I think that it should be concerning for people, and I think that they should know what's going on with this, because when you know, it allows you to make a better plan. And I think that's what a lot of people are lacking right now. Absolutely, a lot of people are lacking making a plan for themselves and for their family. Now you've got the information. Now you know, my friends. If you like this video, just click the like button. That goes so far, so long in the YouTube algorithms. And if you are here for the first time and you really like what we're doing here, click the subscribe button, hit the bell notification so you don't miss out on any future videos. Place a comment if you want to interact with us and let us know what you're thinking about, what we're talking about, and add some insight to the conversation. We'd love to continue this underneath the video in the comment section. That's it for now, my friends. Thanks so much for tuning in.